Alright, YouTube, time for Occult Video 29, and this is a warning video on the topic of occult charlatans, because there are many in this world. Now, I'm going to get in depth about occultists who capitalize upon their work, so-called occultists. I want to make it very clear first, though, that you have to differentiate, in my mind anyway, between those that are offering something of tangible value or those who predominantly they do what they're doing either for free or, if someone's making a living doing like therapy, or they have some sort of mundane job and then they're on the side they're giving, occult spiritual counseling or something. That's one thing. When somebody makes a career, though, out of being a channeler or a medium or a psychic or something like that, or selling, televangelists do the same thing, like Peter Popoff selling supposedly miracle water and things like that. That's a different story altogether. If something of tangible value is being offered, we're talking a web store selling cloaks and ritual daggers and things like that, or books, that's one thing. When you get into people who are offering services of no tangible value for money, and claiming to be occultists or exorcists or mediums or something, that's when you get into the charlatan game, which is really exactly the same, by the way, again, as what happens in televangelism. You would have people who offer, cruise with Charles Stanley package, only $800. Peter Popoff's miracle prayer and spring water, $15.99. Attend the Battle Cry Youth Conference, only $150 for entry, something like that. It's exactly the same within Christianity as it is within the occult. If you've ever been familiar, there's an individual, I wouldn't even know she existed if it weren't for the Legend of Atlantis documentary, which she features in. I've watched it many times. Like a 5-hour documentary. It's actually worth watching, even though some of it's spiritualist nonsense. It's sort of New Age Atlantean lore rather than historical Atlantis accounts, let's face it, but it's interesting to watch. This individual pretends to channel beings from what she terms the intergalactic Brotherhood of Light or something along those lines. And quite clearly, it's just her changing her accent slightly and rambling in New Age speak about space aliens and Atlantis and vibrations and frequencies. Very often, with channelers, it's always basically the same thing. They change their tone. They're linguistically talented enough to do so. You can catch them sometimes. There are ways to tell. When their language usage changes over time, when supposedly they're channeling entities that have no real fixture to the English or any other language on Earth, you can catch them. Sometimes you can get them out of character as well. I've caught her doing this several times, using the term download, for example, which is in its context is a completely new term that she didn't use before when she was doing this in the 80s or 90s. That to me says, well, she's not actually channeling anything, it's just an act. Now, this is an individual which, yes, she gives people a message of hope and light and peace and all that stuff, but still, there is no intergalactic federation of light. It doesn't exist. She's not channeling space aliens. She's not channeling astral entities. She's not doing anything. She's just putting on an act for people, and they happen to find it interesting. Now, if these people were honest enough to label themselves as entertainers first and foremost, this would be a different thing. There are people that do that. Bob Larson. His stuff's primarily entertainment. Alex Jones, he gets into the same weird material. He's an entertainer. People understand that he's an entertainer. They also understand that he's a Shylock, that he's primarily hawking goods on there to make money. That's okay, though. It's entertaining. He goes on there repeatedly and rants for hours on end, and it's fun. It's fun to listen to, even if most of it is just a bunch of hokum. Mediums, I think, are the worst, though. Mediums who pretend to talk, like Jonathan Edwards of early 2000s, late 90s, I believe, era fame, who got caught out being a charlatan as well as all of the others. Mediums are the worst. Mediums, like all of these other classes of charlatan within the fringe of the occult, they fixate on people and focus on people who are going through tough times, who are miserable, who have something wrong in their life, and they give them a false sense of hope by pretending to speak with their dead relatives. I have absolutely no respect whatsoever for anyone who pretends that they talk to the spirits of the dead on behalf of the living. It just doesn't happen. If you want to get into genuine necromancy, you're not talking about taking somebody up on stage with pre-screened questions, of course. There's a pre-screened interview every time. Taking someone up on stage in front of a bunch of cameras and sitting there making a bunch of weird faces and rubbing your head and making weird gestures and noises, that's nonsense. You're a charlatan if you're doing that sort of thing. Tarot cards are the same thing. Now, with tarot cards, it can be a different story. There are literally hundreds of people just on YouTube who do general tarot card readings for free. If they use ad revenue, whatever, more power to them. They're not doing anything specifically wrong. They're just reading tarot cards. It is entertaining. It's a parlor trick. It's like a Ouija board or a pendulum or any of these other things. There's nothing specifically wrong with that. That can be considered a form of entertainment, just something people happen to be interested in. But when people become obsessed with such a thing, then they start buying the personal readings every month and so forth, and they end up running up quite a bill sometimes. To have some psychic talk to them for 10 minutes, $5 a minute basically, to do tarot card readings, and they'll draw it out and make it as long as possible to get more money and squeeze them. You can't get blood from a turnip, but the thing is, a lot of the people that gravitate towards these things are people who their career has been tanked, their family has been broken up, there's something wrong in their life, which is why they're seeking that sort of stuff. The occult should be about uplifting people. It shouldn't have to rely upon money. And my thing is this: if a person claims to have some sort of otherworldly power, they shouldn't need people to pay them for what they do. They should be so astonishing and miraculous that people practically give them money for free without any legal contract or obligation whatsoever. And yet, with all of these services, it's very legalistic. A lot of the more popular mediums and televangelists and so forth that prey upon the weak, they all have lawyers. They have them for a reason. It's not because they're worried that somebody will fraudulently try to expose them, but rather because they are the fraud, afraid of actually being exposed rightfully. Psychics are the same thing. When you hear stories about, the police department contacted a psychic and the psychic led them to the evidence, I wonder how many cases of the psychic being unable to do so there have ever been. You think that got in the news? Probably 9 times out of 10 that's the case. It's just guesswork. That's what the psychic arts in that sense are. Now, as for the genuine psychic arts, yes, I believe it's possible for people to exhibit ESP to a degree. I think most people are unable to control it, and it's sort of random. Telekinesis, maybe. I suppose there is some evidence it could work in some ways. Reading minds, maybe. Reading energy, yes. You can definitely look at an area and get sort of a general feel through senses that most people just don't regularly exercise. But does this mean that a person dedicating their life to making money off of telling you, a bunch of shit that you either already know or just want to hear in vague language that makes it applicable to any situation possible, that's being a charlatan. So there are a lot of occult charlatans out there. Not everything you read within the core of occult literature, by the way, is legitimate. Look at the Key of Solomon, the Lesser Keys. Herein is a grimoire which pretends to be written or directly inspired by King Solomon, but is actually of Renaissance era make. Other than the Ars Notoria, which is older, the rest of the works that comprise it come from later. They can't even necessarily agree on which work specifically should be inside of it. It is almost a work of charlatans, which was recompiled in a dubious manner, the same as how the Bible in many ways was compiled, or any of these other things. Now, does this mean that people don't practice it as though it was real, or that the book itself doesn't have tangible value as something of interest to the person buying it? Not necessarily. It can have that value, but at the same time, even there, we have to be careful Just because something is 3, 4, 500, a few thousand years old doesn't necessarily mean it's true either. And there are people that exploit that too. There are a lot of, if you look at some of the cheap manuscript publishers, a lot of the works there, I've got probably, I think, 30 or 40 of these shorter works from Finbar and Starlight and all of these small publishers that do sort of these cheaper paperbacks. Other than their intrinsic value as collector's items because they're typically small batch printings, which is definitely there. For a bibliophile like me, I don't care. I'll buy them anyway because I'm a bibliophile. I just like books. But as to whether the content there is necessarily valid, I think you could argue a lot of it's not. Some of it, you read through it, some of it appears to be based upon actual tradition within one of these different occult groups. Some is not. But I think the biggest charlatans, the most common, are psychics. You remember Miss Cleo, of course. We all remember Miss Cleo. If you don't remember Miss Cleo, you're too young to be dating me. Just an offhand joke there, but still true. Miss Cleo claimed to be Jamaican, was not actually Jamaican. I think she was from New York, actually, and had lived there all her life. Had these ads that ran sort of in the Chia Pet era. For psychic readings, you know, $1.99 a minute or $2.99 a minute, and she'd come on there and say, "Contact me now, I'm Miss Cleo," and she'd speak with her fake Jamaican accent, and it was very funny, and a lot of people did that. She made so much money you wouldn't believe it. She also got sued because it turns out that her ads were misleading, the cost stated was misleading. It wasn't generally her doing any of the readings at all. It was other random people that she happened to have as underlings, and she got in a lot of trouble for it. But there were a lot of people that thought that it was real. Now, I at the time, even as a child, I knew TV psychic, that's a charlatan. This is not some mage with actual powers or anything like that, or a seasoned psychic who actually does have some sort of view beyond the veil of reality. This is not the case. What this person is someone who is interested primarily in making money. It has corrupted them, and they have a good floor show. It's like the way we would regard magic as occult versus illusionist. The illusionist, though, is honest. If you go to a stage magician, they don't say, "Oh, well, by the power of this Sumerian demon or by the power of King Solomon, I cause these tricks to work." No, it's an illusion. You know that it's not real, and it's not real magic in an occult sense. You know that they're performing some sort of sleight of hand trick. This doesn't mean that it's bad or wrong or not entertaining. I've seen some stage magicians that are absolutely amazing. There was one on Penn and Teller, an Asian dude who did card tricks. He had stuff, smoke that would come out of his hands, and some of the things, it fooled them. It was on that show with Penn and Teller. It fooled Penn and Teller. It sure as hell fooled me. I have no fucking clue how he did most of these tricks. I think his name was Shin Lim. Yeah, I mean, he was amazing. But he never stood up in front of the crowd and said, "Oh, well, this same power allows me to contact your dead relatives for $5.99 a minute." He never did that because people know it's stage magic. It's something meant for entertainment. You're meant to marvel at how these things are performed, knowing full well that it's a trick, but it's entertaining nonetheless because you don't know how it's done. The difference with an occult charlatan somebody is claiming to have some otherworldly power. They're claiming that it's absolutely real, spiritual, divine, cosmically important, something like that. They have psychic powers. They can contact the dead. They can curse your enemies or whatever, and they're charging you a fee for it. They're not selling you something that allows you to practice the occult and dabble with it yourself. They're trying to capitalize on it just for themselves and make all the money and corner the market. The truth is, if such powers exist, it's not limited to just the people that are selling that power. Anybody, thus, by the same token, could do exactly the same thing. I think that beyond the mediums are morally the worst because they're preying upon the people who most deserve to be left alone and not preyed upon. Someone just lost their fucking relative in a car crash. My mom died of cancer, my sister died in a car crash and stuff, and I need to talk to this medium because I want to know what direction I should take in my life to help their departed spirits be happy or something. Beyond that, if you look at all these TV shows, anything revolving around ghost hunting, psychics, usually monster hunting, not always, there are some good shows about stuff like Bigfoot or lake monsters, but most of them, they're all charlatans. They're actors. Everything that they do on these shows is an act. I'm surprised that people actually take it seriously. And in the post-Survivor era, when the entertainment industry, circa the mid and late 90s, realized how profitable it could be to trick the audience of a TV show into thinking that what they were watching was real, and they termed it reality TV, that's when TV began dying. All of these various shows are no different from the televangelists that they had on during the Satanic Panic selling people spring water. They're exactly the same. Many times the individuals on here say, well, I studied demonology for 10 years, or, I had angelic experiences and now I can see ghosts and spirits and help them depart to the other side and all of these things. Sorry, folks, not real. And anytime you call an exorcist and they start hauling out little machines that make beepy noises and scratchy noises, they're not an exorcist. There's no demon in your house anyway that can actually do anything, so what's the fucking point? If you just read some of the works of the Hermetics from the antiquated period, you'll find that the term demon applies to more than just gnashing of teeth and big leathery wings and red skin and pitchforks. Anyway, most people ignore me when I point this out. But the same way that a televangelist would encourage little old Christian ladies to send them their social security checks to be blessed by Jesus, is at work in the occult. And people need to be aware of that. These TV psychics are all phony. There's not a single one with any bit of power whatsoever. Any medium, any occultist with a TV show is probably a complete faker. If they're doing a documentary on something else, then it can be worth watching. There have been a handful of occultists that they've had on, like, Ancient Aliens. Now, you can consider that bunk if you want. That's, again, primarily entertainment mixed with some history. That's worth watching. They're not selling miracle spring water to people or something like that. By the way, if you had a vial of Peter Popoff's miracle spring water, ironically enough, it probably would be worth quite a bit of money simply because of the infamy involved with their sale. So, you can keep that in mind. The funniest thing is, a lot of times, when you have scams or rip-off products or something like that, or the new craze now, like poorly made knockoffs from China of stuff that would be brand name here in the United States or in Europe or something, sometimes those are worth a hell of a lot of money. You wouldn't believe it. Knockoff video games, there was one fucking copy made in 1989 or something. Now it's worth like 20 grand or something. I mean, it's preposterous, it's ridiculous, but it's pretty funny anyway. But within the occult, charlatans can be very damaging, both to the reputation of the occult at large, which is, actual practicing occultists need to completely excoriate the fakers. They need to rail against them night and day and force them to shut down if possible. Just like the Christians, they should have said, well, these televangelists are just a bunch of idiots. They're not even godly people. They're just a bunch of entertainers. They made the mistake of not doing so, and now look what's happening to Christianity. Lest it happen to the occult, of course, those of us who actually study philosophy and study these ancient texts and ruminate over herbs and all sorts of stuff like that, need to call them what they are. They're charlatans. They want money. If someone's making, informational videos that are free to view, or again, write a book selling, runes or incense is fine. If somebody's marketing their own incense blends with a demonic twist, like the Satanic Apotheca or something, that's fine. It's still got intrinsic value. It's fun to smell. It's incense. Does this mean necessarily that it's going to help you call demons? No, but it's still incense. It's no different from regular incense, maybe, but it's still incense. But when somebody begins preying upon those who have lost a loved one, they need guidance in their life, something like that, and they're charging people money to give them advice that any other occultist would give them for free. My goodness, all they've done, just like Miss Cleo, they put out a bunch of ads, people respond, they take that money, they roll it over for more ads, and they get rich convincing people that they have power. It's basically, it's a complete fiscal scheme. And eventually they usually get caught because they go one person too far. They get involved in a sting operation, Peter Popoff, Miss Cleo, whatever. They do get stung in that manner, then they fall from grace. It's just like these televangelists, like John Haggart there, Ted Haggart, I mean, who was, was smoking meth and crack and having sex with male hookers, making a living primarily off of saying how bad gays were and giving gay conversion therapy. This is what happens. They get their just desserts in the end. It's just a matter of how many people's lives they manipulate or fuck up in the meantime. It's literally no different than a cult leader, except with more public exposure. That's all that these people are. They're no different from, the Heaven's Gate cult or something, except that they want money instead of for their congregants to drink arsenic or something like that. It's rather sad that it happens. I mean, you'd think people who realize the occult is 99% studying philosophy and herbs and stuff like that, and ruminating on the nature of life, or studying, astrological charts and numbers and doing all that sort of stuff, they shouldn't be taken in so easily by this nonsense. They're not just a read one book Christian who, is half illiterate or something. They should know better. And yet they still got tangled up in this nonsense. I don't even find all the ghost hunter stuff, things like that, to be even remotely entertaining. The cryptids, that's fine. Ghost hunting and mediums and stuff, Jonathan Edwards, it's all a bunch of bullshit. That's all it will ever be. So beware of occult charlatans. If somebody is saying, oh, well, I can help you with your life, you just have to pay me $10.99, and everything will be magically better, and I'll contact the spirits of the dead with, I'll take your $10 bill and I'll light it on fire and the spirit will appear in the smoke. That's bullshit. There's no other way possibly to put it. That's about all. Peace out.